Abhinandan was captured. He fell in Pakistan and he was captured. There was a very credible threat of force of the use of 9 missiles, as a result of which Pakistan made the choice of returning the pilot, not wanting to escalate that conflict, trying to de-escalate the situation. The Prime Minister of Pakistan attempted to call the Prime Minister of India. India was going to escalate the situation in case the pilot was not returned. Certainly in 2008, India should have given this response that it finally gave in 2016 and 19 with the surgical strikes and airstrikes.
Was this episode mentioned by Prime Minister Modi in some of his speeches? Was that the Qatl ki Raat he was referring to?
Yes, the Prime Minister did mention this in his campaign speech. He was talking and he did refer to this episode. Article 370 was something that took Pakistan by surprise. This book that I've written is an account, a practitioner's account of the 76 years of the relationship from 15th August 1947 to 15th August 2023. Well, it's a playful title, and the reason is that I discovered that anger is an important motive in this relationship over the last 76 years. There's been anger over partition, there was anger about wars, there's been Indian anger over Pakistan's perfidy, there's been anger over terrorism. So there is a lot of anger, real, justified, unjustified, feigned in the relationship. And in terms of policy, there has been a lot of conversation around management. That the argument is that you cannot resolve this issue peacefully and permanently, but you can manage it in different ways and through diplomacy and through other means. So I think the whole idea was to juxtapose these two ideas and call it anger management. So it shouldn't be taken too literally on by asking whose anger is more, whose anger is less.
Mr. Bisaria, I'm now straight away coming to the chapters and some of you mentioned after the Balakot incident, after the Balakot strike, you got a call from Mr. Sohail Khan, from the investor.
The Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, Mr. Sohail Mahmood, yes.
So, and Imran Khan wanted to talk to our Prime Minister. They suspected that we are putting 9 missiles facing them. Can you give us an account of that? Because that's an interesting anecdote which has come first time.
Absolutely. So, after Pulwama, India had taken action in Balakot, and that was followed by Pakistan's operation, which it called Swift Retort in India, and as a result of which an Indian pilot, Abhinandan Varthaman, was captured. He fell in Pakistan and he was captured. So what I've tried to do is present an account of the coercive diplomacy that took place after that to get the pilot back. And there was a very credible threat of force of the use of 9 missiles. And I've given an account of how that played out in Pakistan, that Pakistan had this credible threat which was amplified to them through various means, directly and also through other diplomats of other countries. And as a result of which, Pakistan made the choice of returning the pilot, not wanting to escalate that conflict, and being assured that if the pilot was not returned, there would be huge consequences. And as a result of that, and in trying to de-escalate the situation, the Prime Minister of Pakistan attempted to call the Prime Minister of India. And the point also here is that the Prime Minister of Pakistan was then felt obliged to take a decision, because the threat of force was very credible, to return the pilot in order not to escalate the situation.
Were we very close to taking an action? when you say this?
Well, the thing about coercive diplomacy is that the threat of force should be credible, which means that not just the adversary, but you should believe yourself that you are going to use it. Now, whether or not it would have been used is a question that can be debated. But the point is that the use of force to get an outcome was successfully done by India.
What is to you from the Prime Minister here, or the leadership here?
Well, I was at that point in India. Right after the Pulwama attack, I came to India. So I was part of the team in India, which was monitoring the situation and dealing with it. So the message, I think, that was going to Pakistan at that point was very clear, that India was going to escalate the situation in case the pilot was not returned.
So pilot was returned eventually. So were you expecting that they are going? What was your assessment at that time? Because a lot of things must be going over.
Yes. So from all that we heard from Pakistan and all the conversations that we had, we were confident that the pilot would be returned because the consequences would have been serious. And this was a message that went loud and clear to Pakistan's system, and Pakistan then reacted. So we were fairly sure that the pilot would be returned unharmed.
Sir, in your book, you are taking decades of relationship. You are mentioning about that. So in your book, you also suggest that the response to terrorism now, which is always seen, it's a very coercive one, and it's very effective in a way, you are saying. So do you think that similar response in the past would have made things different? What was your suggestion when you say that if we would have reacted at that time this way, like during the Mumbai attacks? Do you
Certainly.
think that there was weak responses in by the past governments?
I would make the argument that while there are multiple dynamics at play at any given point of time, and we need to judge decisions taken by policymakers at different points of history based on what is available to them as information and as the options. But I think that by perfect hindsight, if you look back today, certainly in 2008, India should have given this response that it finally gave in 2016 and 19 with the surgical strikes and airstrikes. And I make an even deeper point here. I think that the terrorism and the pain India suffered in Punjab in the 1980s could have been lessened if India had taken hard power action in the 80s or early 90s. Similarly, in the 90s, the pain that India suffered in Kashmir could have been lessened if the point was made to Pakistan that India would use hard force as a response to meddling in either of these states. And similarly, in the 2000s, when there was terrorism happening all over India, I think that could have been prevented if we had taken action in the 90s. So I think certainly if it had entered Pakistan's calculus that India would respond very sharply and with force, punitive or preventive, to stop terrorism, then the responses in Pakistan of using terrorism as a low-cost option would have been different.
So now is it changing?
Well, that is the argument certainly that we make, that India has finally found an answer in the sub-conventional space to terrorism, because now Pakistan knows it has entered its security paradigms, that there would be a strong response to any act of terrorism, whether by state actors or non-state actors, and therefore it would know that there would be a cost to any such behavior, and therefore it would modify that behavior.
Mr. Bisaria, you also mentioned that, in fact, ISI has tipped off India of an attack. This is very unheard of earlier in the past. Can you just throw some light on this?
Well, a lot of things happen which don't come into the public domain between intelligence agencies. So it's not that it's never happened in the past. But what was unusual in the episode I mentioned in my book is that it was escalated to a sort of political level by raising it at the level of the Indian High Commissioner. And that meant that there was a special consideration in making a point to India that Pakistan was giving an intelligence tip-off and wanted India to know that it was giving that tip-off. So I thought that was certainly significant.
Sir, in fact, I just want to come back to my question number one. When you said that there was an attempted call by the Imran Khan. Was this episode mentioned by Prime Minister Modi in some of his speeches? Was that the Qatl ki Raat he was referring to?
Yes, the Prime Minister did mention this in his campaign speech. He was talking and he did refer to this episode. But Imran Khan also referred to this episode in his own speech in Parliament, that he had made an attempt to talk to the Indian Prime Minister. And apart from that, there was a conversation in Pakistan's Parliament also, which has been reported by Pakistan's an MP. He mentioned that both Foreign Minister Qureshi and the Army Chief Bajwa came to brief the MPs and said there's a serious the danger of the crisis escalating and India taking hard action, and therefore we should return the pilot.
Sir, now rewinding back a little, going to Agra Summit. In fact, you have also served with Prime Minister Vajpayee, and was a very, very interesting episode which you mentioned in your book about the Agra Summit. Largely, there was a narrative that Mr. Advani vetoed it and the Agra Summit failed. But what you are suggesting is a different side of the story. I will be grateful if you can throw some light on that.
Yes, I think the narrative, part of it was promoted by Pakistan and by Musharraf himself in his book, which said there were certain hawks in India, and he named also Mr. Advani, who were preventing an outcome of a good document that was coming out of Agra. But the facts are different. The fact is that what was responsible was Musharraf's overreach on Kashmir. He wanted to link every development in the document with movement on Kashmir. He wanted to link progress on everything with Kashmir. He didn't allow too much of a reference to terrorism in the drafts that were being discussed. And therefore, the summit failed because there was too much of a gap between Pakistan's position and India's position. So Mr. Advani and the entire CCS, the Cabinet Committee on Security members, were present in Agra. And all of them had a fairly consensual view on this, that this is not something we should allow. We should not let him get away with it. So that was the reason for the failure and not personalities.
But then something that you went inside the room, Mr. Brajesh Mishra wrote something, then you gave it to Prime Minister. That's
right. So if you remember the morning, that particular morning, it was an interview, a breakfast meeting that Musharraf did with about 35 editors and senior editors of newspapers. And NDTV released that footage, and it was playing out on television while the Prime Minister was sitting and talking to Musharraf and wasn't aware of this. So Brajesh Mishra, Principal Secretary to the PM, then he asked me to go in and inform the Prime Minister. So he jotted down some things and I had them typed up. I wrote a few things describing and basically saying that it's playing out on television. Musharraf has said such things about Kashmir, such things about terrorism. And I went in and walked into the room. The two leaders stopped their conversation, looked at me, and I told the Prime Minister there's something important. He looked at the paper and I walked out. After that, he looked at the paper and said, General Saab, ye aapne kya kiya? And he said, words to the effect that This had spoiled the atmospherics. And because of that, and from that point onwards, the summit went downhill.
But you also refer that it's not a failure, it was not a complete failure. Vajpayee got to know a lot of things about them.
Exactly. So I make that argument that it was part of Vajpayee's journey to Islamabad and in 2004 when he signed an actual peace document, a document which guaranteed that Pakistan would not use terror against India. But to get to that space, he needed to understand the mind of the dictator. So it was a process that Agra helped in Vajpayee understanding Musharraf better, and it possibly helped Musharraf understand India better, that he had a simplistic view that he would go and get a deal on Kashmir and come back, that it wasn't so simple. So I think Agra was a great tutorial for both the leaders to understand each other better.
So coming to some modern development of Kartarpur corridor. This happened when there was a total freeze and relationships were all-time low almost, and still it happened. And you mentioned about there were some divine forces which worked for that. Because it's a it's a subject which is close to a lot of people in India. So it will be good if you can tell us something about it.
Certainly. So I feel that there was certainly something miraculous in that process happening. It happened, as you remember, for the 550th birth anniversary for Guru Nanak. It was opened by both sides and it functions to the day. There were several security concerns on the Indian side about it. But the point I also make is that it's a compliment to India's democracy and India's political leadership, that despite some concerns on the security side about the corridor, the political leadership said that this is in the interest of the people, and Prime Minister Modi himself led this process to make sure that the corridor became a reality. So I think it was, I was part of the diplomacy in getting it together, and I think in that diplomacy, the security concerns were addressed so that the corridor could move forward.
So your tenure in Islamabad made news a lot of times, It was a very eventful, you can say, tenure. So I think it's in the first time in our history that somebody was expelled and you are the one after the Article 370 was removed. Can you give us a sense what was the feeling there when Article 370 was abolished and how things turned out? And also tell us about your experiences with this.
Article 370 was something that took Pakistan by surprise. They hadn't really expected this to happen. And I think it was a symptom of India saying that our Kashmir policy is separate from our Pakistan policy, which is foreign policy, and this is an internal adjustment that we are doing, which Pakistan has no locus standi in it. And Pakistan wanted to react to it, but its options were very limited because it could not at that point use hard power. There was a strong power differential between the countries. So what they thought was the easiest option was to ask the High Commissioner to leave, and therefore I was asked to leave. But that was simply, in a sense, a lazy option that you have to express anger somehow. So you do it by asking the Indian head of mission to leave, but that was not something that Pakistan could seriously think about and consider and have a policy on how to deal with.
My last set of questions. Anything which do you think I missed out and you want your viewer to know about India-Pakistan, since it is a very, very deep and sensitive relationship at the same time?
This book that I've written is an account, a practitioner's account of the 76 years of the relationship from 15th August 1947 to 15th August 2023. And what I have tried to do is put a focus on the diplomacy, the diplomats and the conversations. You could equally have a book with a focus on the military issues, on the intelligence issues. But this was on the diplomacy And the central point is that diplomacy matters. So leadership matters a lot. The Pakistan structure matters a lot. Global forces matter. But at the margins, the diplomats on the ground and diplomacy matters. And they can influence events in different ways. And that's what this is an account about.
Sir, were you not handicapped because you could not diplomatically handicapped because you could not reach out to the army chiefs there, which are the real powers that be, who run the show there. And you are dealing with the people who have to take permission from them and then coming back and forth. How difficult is this? Because I think there was some reference regarding this also in your book.
Yeah, but diplomacy can be creative. This is a peculiar relationship where we cannot talk openly with the powers that run that country. It's an unusual situation. But there are creative ways on the ground of getting over it and reaching out to those people through proxies and having those conversations, which India has been doing and India has got used to doing over many decades of dealing with Pakistan.
My last question is, do you see any hope now of the revival of talks or diplomacy? As you said, that this is a very, this is the first time India is walking the talk, that terror can't go hand in hand with talks. So how will it pan out? Because I don't think so that Pakistan is still given, because we recently saw some attacks which are links attached to cross-border. So what is the future of this diplomacy?
Well, there are multiple dynamics at play, and I would be cautiously optimistic about 2024 for the simple reason that there will be, or elections are scheduled in Pakistan. Elections are going to happen in India. And with new regimes, with fresh mandates in both countries, I see hope of being able to reach out to each other in small steps and taking a sort of detente process forward. So I think there is a reason to be cautiously hopeful about 2024.